Welcome to F&B Purchasing Doc. My name is Dennis. Today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about food handling, especially in light of what's been happening with the virus and all that. Everybody's very conscious now of, more conscious about washing their hands and all those things that it's just a prudent thing to do. I have a little graphic here, food safety basics document that you can look over, and again, it'll just remind you of a lot of the basics. There's nothing really earth-shattering here, but I'm going to also mention, besides the wholesomeness of the product that of course you're going to put out, and I know all the effort that y'all use to stay up with code and your local health department issues and so on, is selfishly, there's also a food cost side of this. And you're probably rolling your eyes like, really? Well, it's not so much, of course, if you find contaminated product and so on, yeah, it's got to go in the trash, or I call it the bone barrel, it's got to go. So of course that automatically hits food costs. But beyond that, there's a couple of rules in food handling. And we're going to get into this detail a little bit more over the next couple of weeks in regards to sizing and that kind of thing. But the rule basically goes that, you know, God makes the product. God makes the animal, God makes the vegetable, etc. So when it comes to us, there's people that are going to touch it. There's people that are going to manipulate it. There's people that are going to further process it to a level that we decide. 20 years ago, I have to be honest with you, I'm seeing species of fish, for instance, like before, I forget, it starts with an S. I should know what this is. But 20 years ago, first of all, catfish was considered a trash fish. Everybody in the South, you know, it was kind of like eating roadkill. That was the idea that people had back in the 70s. I mean, catfish were bottom feeders and blah, blah, blah. Well, as that white flesh became more and more valuable, as the decades started clicking by, I would say, you know, 20 years ago, that puts it in the 90s. I would say 90% of catfish was all farm raised. Idaho was one of the biggest areas. Now it's all over the place. And to sell somebody you got wild catfish, they're going to laugh at you, because I don't think it exists outside of local markets. Maybe you'll find stuff in Louisiana, little independent restaurants maybe still have sources locally, etc. But the mass majority of this, quote, trash fish has now turned into center plate for so many people because of the popularity it got. And now I understand it's the species that are coming out of Asia. Again, I apologize, it starts with an S. But it is a species, it's a brother, so to speak, to catfish. It's not exactly the same species, but it's become now more and more popular center plate in many, many restaurants across the United States. But in any event, the point is that once the product is caught, raised, slaughtered, whatever, the many people that put a knife to it, cost goes up. Every time somebody touches it, costs go up. Like for instance, if you're talking about 1x1 strip, well, of course, we got choice, upper end choice, and prime, but a 1x1 strip is a 1x1 strip. Now, true, there'll be price points, but it, of course, is less expensive than buying a 10-ounce pre-cut strip. Well, why? Because somebody's got to cut it. There's waste involved, etc., etc. I know it makes sense. I'm not explaining anything rocket science here, okay? But so goes the case in your kitchen. When you buy the product, and you have to touch it for one reason or another, it costs more money. And it's not just the labor costs, it's the management of labor costs, for instance. In some of the bigger kitchens, whether it's, and maybe it's the case in the smaller, but many of them, there's people that, of course, work double duty. You know, line cooks, of course, are brought in early, let's say, to do prep work, if not for that day, for maybe that night, depending on the way you split it up. It's not unheard of for dish machine people to be given tasks and training how to cut, the tips off of string beans. I mean, very minor stuff you don't want to allow untrained people to handle, $4, $5, $8, $9, $10, $20 a pound product. But there's a lot to be said for keeping a staff member busy waiting for the rush. But along with that lack of training may come lack of training in regards to food safety. Kitchens are hot. Commercial kitchens are hot, but just by the very nature of it. Here in Texas, our air conditioning units are just struggling to keep up. And I'm sure that must be the case. I mean, 90 degrees outside is 90 degrees outside, whether it's in Long Island or in Galveston Island. So I get it. But there's even more attentiveness to that back door being open, allowing hot air to get in without air curtains. And it's not unusual for maybe the dish machine guy to leave something on the table and go quickly run some glasses through or whatever. And if by chance he gets sidestepped and the rush all of a sudden comes up on him, I would double check and make sure that prep area is being attended to. If he can't get to that menial, low-end product handling, somebody's have enough snap to put that under refrigeration. Very highly perishable product like fish fillets, like shrimp, etc., need to be kept in an ice bath. And it's not just from a Board of Health standpoint. Every minute that product is outside the threshold of the temperature that we both know it needs to stay in and to stay pristine, you're losing time, you're losing clock, you're losing valuable perishable life on that product. It could be the difference of whether it goes into the bone barrel after 2 to 3 days or not. It just needs to really be handled with kid gloves. Hi. Okay, this is our Let's Get Personal segment. Basically, it's just things that had worked for me, management that I used to like to share with my trainees. And also, there were seasoned managers that we would share ideas and whatever, and this was one of them for me. When I would be walking around the restaurant and I'd hear an employee say to another employee, who's working tonight? What manager's working tonight? That's when I knew I had some problems. They shouldn't ask that. They shouldn't need to ask that. There's a concept of management through one voice. And basically what that means is, in a typical management structure, there's either an semblance of typically 3 people at least, sometimes 4. Maybe 2 with 2 captains in the context of a fine dining situation or whatever that takes over and would work a management shift when the other manager's off, that kind of thing. But for all practical purposes, let's just make believe we got 4. And let's call them general manager, assistant manager, relief manager. That is like the 3rd one on the rung. And then a trainee. That could be a captain that just got promoted, and in a multi-unit situation, it could be somebody that's up for relief manager at another unit or something like that. Well, just by the very nature of things, managers got different opinions on how to run things. When it comes to the employee's standpoint, the reason they're asking the question is, I guarantee you, one manager is more prudent on checking out side work than others. Okay, now, You know, is the moon going to fall out of the sky because of that? No. But what happens over time is staff always wonders and worries about what management thinks of them. And there's times when misconceptions can happen, and where I'll hear employees say, well, you know, Tom, I don't know why, but he just don't like me. I get along with Dennis, okay, of course I have to say that. But Billy, you know, the second guy, you know, he's okay. We get along fine, and Dennis, I think, is okay. But I don't know what the heck's wrong with Tom, man. I got that guy sideways somehow. And then every time Tom's working, they're really uncomfortable. You always wonder why staff quit, okay? I'm not saying this is the only reason. I mean, they go to college, they, you know, found a server job at a restaurant that's maybe higher volume and they make more money, whatever. There's all kinds of possibilities. But you don't want to lose good people over miscommunication. I mean, it's bad enough to lose a good server over a real deal. You know, I've had husbands get promoted and move them out of town. And you just go, you know, is divorce in the picture? You know what I mean? Because you're losing a great staff member. But no joking aside, it's so important that you guys and gals sit down at a time when it's appropriate for all four of you to spend a good hour and once a month and talk about inconsistencies maybe of the way you feel about it. You know, the biggest one is I would sit down and we'd go over the schedules. And I would say, okay, let's talk about Mary. Now, Mary is one of our full-time people. She works pretty much just Monday through Friday, breakfast and lunch, and then she's out of here. We'll fill in every once in a while on a Saturday night or whatever. And I'll say, you know, what do you all think of Mary? And you would be shocked at the difference of opinions around the table. You know, one person would think she's a superstar. The other one would be like, oh, man, she talks about her family way too much. I think she hangs out at the tables, you know, talking to the regulars and leaves other people without serving them. And then the fourth person's going, I don't know. You know what I mean? So it just goes around the table. And honestly, it's really a good exercise to show your management staff that, number one, there's a need for us to not always feel the same way, don't misunderstand, but to treat them the same way. And if they, like for instance, that one manager, if he thinks they're talking to the people is putting everybody, the service levels off, I'd like to switch shifts with him and spend a week and watch and see how true it is, etc. I know it sounds silly, but that's the level of effort that comes with building a staff that's solid. Okay, well, that's it for me. You have yourself a great afternoon, and we'll talk soon.